Well, pack it in, boys, it's all Jover, because I just read this headline without actually reading the entire thing and surmised there's no distinction between what's going on here and what goes on at other studios.
You what?
I hope you guys had a fantastic Memorial Day. I sure as hell did. Today's topic is a bit of an interesting one, and for a bit I was going back and forth between making this a Salt video or just a normal news video. But the problem I had with making this a Salt video is mainly the fact that over 90% of the Salt from The Usual Suspects is just them parroting the exact same sentence ad nauseum. So here's a quick little montage of those idiots. Okay, we good? Can we actually discuss the topic at hand now? Great! Let's just dive right in, shall we? Oh, and before anyone asks, yes, a video on Blob 6 coming to day 1 to Game Pass will be coming later this week.
Yes! 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 Yes!
So, what exactly is going on with Larian Studios? Well, you see, in an article by Eurogamer, Larian Studios CEO stated while answering a question at a Q&A in Poland, a bit of crunch had to be done during the development of Baldur's Gate 3. Now, I am definitely on the side that crunch, more often than not, is a bad thing that can lead to more problems than it solves. However, I am also a realist. I worked in a creative field. I do YouTube as a hobby, for fuck's sake. So I know from first-hand experience, crunch will never go away. Especially in the video game industry. Unforeseen roadblocks can pop up out of nowhere. Deadlines can be moved up without a moment's notice. Generally, if you work in this industry, you will have to accept that crunch will happen to you at some point.
Come on. Come on, baby. I just want out.
That being said, there is a very distinct difference between what Larian did here and what many other studios like Naughty Dog, Rockstar, or fucking Ubisoft do.
Impossible.
So let's talk about that, right? Because unlike the fanboys, I can understand nuance and complexity when it comes to a subject like this.
Yes! Yes! Yes!
So the first part of this article reads as such. Larian Studios' Sven Vink has opened up about crunch culture at the studio, acknowledging that the team did, at times, have to do a bit of crunch when things happened that the studio didn't foresee. In the Q&A Vink hosted after his address at the Digital Dragons conference in Poland, Vink was asked if the team ever had to crunch. That is the term given to extreme overtime studios compel staffs to do to get a game ready for its release date. And whilst Vink said the team wasn't overly required to crunch, and it was certainly less on Baldur's Gate 3 than we did in the past, it would be a lie to say that we didn't crunch at all. So already, if we could take Vink at his word, is vastly different from what a lot of other major studios do. Crunch was applied when things the studio didn't foresee happened, which, as I said prior, is something that just unfortunately happens in this industry. He then goes on to say that the crunch on Baldur's Gate 3 was also less than they did in the past. So once again, if we can take him at his word, this seems like something he knows should be done only in very, very rare circumstances, which is corroborated by the next part of the article, which reads as such. We didn't overly crunch, Vink said, but we did have to do a bit of crunch. And I think, to be honest, you will always have a little bit when you're trying to finish something, especially when there's so much complexity that needs to be brought up. Vink further added that anyone who had to work late was paid for their overtime. Many studios purportedly do not, and only very, very, very rarely would people work over the weekend or past 8 p.m.
Really makes you think.
Okay, did you catch that last part? Because that is a very important distinction. Because you see, there is a reason why crunch is generally so abhorred, and that is due to 3 factors. One being payment. A lot of times at major studios, they either barely pay any extra for your overtime, or in some cases, they don't pay extra at all. 2, the amount of hours crunched, because as you guys might recall, the CEO of Rockstar was bragging at one point about working 100-hour weeks, because I'm sure the CEO was putting in just as much work as the other developers, right guys?
You stupid.
And 3, the overall burnout and impact of developers' health. Never forget that Naughty Dog's mandated overtime not only put one developer into hospital from overwork, but 70% of the studio's game designers quit after Uncharted 4's release.
You think it's a cry for help?
And that's the difference between what Larian is talking about and what many of us talk about when it comes to crunch culture. I'm sorry, fanboys, but crunch culture is not developers are crunching every now and then for a bit. It's studios that are forcing mandated crunch either by stating it directly as a policy or in some cases via manipulation at the cost of the developer's health. I remember an episode of Castle Super Beast in which Wooly talked about his time as a QA dev at Square Enix. Maybe it wasn't at Square Enix, it could have been at another one, I don't know, it was such a long time ago that I'm basically going off of memory. But he talked about how the studio would attempt to get people to work overtime by talking about how they're looking for team players to work on a bunch of new upcoming projects. And if they're impressed by how much of a team player you are, you may be picked for one of these upcoming projects.
You sure about that? You sure about that? That's why?
Which is literally textbook manipulation at its finest. Like I said earlier, crunch, especially in a creative field, is inevitable. Hell, I've crunched on videos like my old Cyberpunk review. I literally refused to sleep until I was done with that, and let me tell you something, that was a bad idea. If a studio has to crunch, it is up to the studio head to ensure that A, your developers are being properly compensated for their work, and B, you're making sure their health is not compromised or damaged as a result. You don't make it a standard practice. You don't brag about 100-hour work weeks. You don't crunch your devs to the point where 70% leave after your major release. That is the difference between Larian and many other studios. Because if the crunch was so awful at Larian, why is their developer retainment so high? Why haven't we heard from ex-devs about it? And hey, in the interest of devil's advocate, maybe they just haven't come forward yet, right? I mean, you never know. Maybe this whole video will be rendered out of date later on. But that outcome is incredibly unlikely. So no, fanboys, despite your best efforts, this isn't a Naughty Dog bad, Larian good situation. This is an example of how crunch should be utilized sparingly, rarely requiring weekends or after 8 p.m. hours, instead of mandating it at the cost of your developer's health. That's going to be it for today's video, folks. Thank you all for tuning in. I hope this video informed you about the reality of the situation. It's time for the crab fact of the day. Did you know you can actually harvest meat from a crab without killing it? Although fishermen do this by tearing off one of the crab's claws, crabs can actually regrow the lost claw. While a single claw doesn't have much meat, many claws from many crabs can make up for the small portions. A little grim, but something worth noting regardless. As always, if you enjoyed the video, like, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. As always, to stay up to date on all things crab, you can follow me on Twitter via the link in the description below. And if you're looking for a way to support the channel, you can consider becoming a member. For just 99 cents a month, you get access to the community Discord, the Crab Shack. Once you're in for good, as well as emotes you can harass me with live on streams. But with all that out of the way, I will see you guys in the next video.